You are now tuned into the People Before Politics radio show, brought to you by the good folks at
Black Westchester, Black Westchester, Black Westchester, Black Westchester. Check the newspaper. Black Westchester, Black Westchester, Black Westchester. Check the newspaper.
Real talk for the community since 2014. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are tuned in to a special edition of the Black Westchester Power Hour Super Tuesdays, where we interview the candidates. Today's guest is a friend of the show, New York City governor candidate Jumaane Williams. Welcome to the show, my brother.
Peace and blessings. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for taking this time to do this. Definitely want to talk to you. First and foremost, I understand. Congratulations in order. You got a newborn, right? Am I right?
I do. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. It's been a journey. It's been a hell of a year, but the Most High is with us, has been with us. I have a newborn. Also, you may not know, but my wife was dealing with cervical cancer, but praise God, she had her last treatment, and everything's looking up now.
I was going to ask you, how's the family? How's she doing? That's good.
Okay, so I got a little makeshift situation going on here to make sure I made this work. So pardon me a little bit for.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So I know. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. I know you're running for governor now. I know some people look at you as a long shot candidate. Because you didn't get the at the what was it, the convention? You had to get a certain amount. Yeah, you get on the ballot, so you had to go out and get your signatures and all that. And a lot of people didn't think you had a chance. You just got the endorsement, I think, a month or so ago from the Workers' Family Party, which is definitely stranger to the Working Family Party. They've endorsed you several times. Why are you running for governor now? Let's start there.
First, I do want to mention, although we didn't get on the convention, we didn't expect to. But they're brilliant in their marketing. What was lost there is that in 2018, I got 6% of the vote when I ran for lieutenant governor. That was lieutenant governor. And then if you get 25% of the vote, you get on automatically. And for a few weeks, Jay Jacobs, who was just stewarding this party in a terrible way, was telling everybody, "Oh, I think he might get it." But our numbers didn't show that. We actually were only about 7%. But then we realized why he was saying that. It's because we doubled our support. We got 12.5% of the vote against the sitting governor in her own house that is made as a coronation, which is remarkable. And if it hadn't been for him making believe like we were getting 25%, that would have been the headline. So I'm so proud of what we did there, doubling our support, running for a higher office against an incumbent is a real achievement. We always viewed it as the glass half full because as organizers, we know the power of being on the ground and speaking with folks. And so, you get to save a little bit of money, which is important if you get on without doing the petitions. But one of the biggest boosts we had in our race in 2018 was actually getting those petitions. And so we got 40,000 people. We got so much that they didn't even bother to challenge. And we're on the way. As you mentioned, not only we get get Working Families Party support, we actually have more support now from elected officials across the state than we had in 2018. So we're really excited. We normally peak toward the end, and that's what's happening now. But for your question, I'm running because part of the work that we're doing at the Public Advocate's Office and part of the work that we've always done. But I felt like, wouldn't it be great to actually have the tools to do the things that I've been advocating for? And I keep hearing our leaders, the governor included, say we have to return to normal. And I keep saying, no, we don't. Normal didn't work for Black Westchester. Matter of fact, it didn't work for most people in Westchester. It didn't work for most people in New York State. And so it's important to make sure we know we want to normalize people's lives again, but we don't want to go back to where we were. The one thing we could do in honoring the 70,000 people we lost in the state was to not go back to normal. And unfortunately, our governor hasn't realized that yet.
So now I know, so you ran for lieutenant governor and you gave her a run for her money. I know Cuomo beat was Cynthia Nixon. That was convincingly, but they was a little scared that you might pull off the lieutenant governor race. Now this is a different race, and she's the sitting governor right now. What makes you believe you got a chance to win?
Well, one, I told you I walk with the Most High, so I always do that. And every race I've run, the goalpost always gets moved for people like me, people who are saying we have to push back against the status quo and take the political risks necessary. We have to understand that the seats that we represent are not more important than the people. The seats that we hold are not more important than the people we represent. And as you mentioned, thanks to coming to places like this show, thanks to Black Westchester in the paper, we got our name out, and we went from there goes crazy Jumaane to oh snap, you might do it toward the end of the race, and with no real money to show, no real institutional support in particular, we got 47% of the vote across the state. We shocked. We got more votes than any non-white candidate ever in a statewide primary, and we got more votes than we got the third most votes than anyone ever. Unfortunately, the first two were Cuomo and Hochul, but it still said a lot. What we were able to do when people heard our message, and we said then, what if we had someone that was willing to stand up, even if it's against a powerful governor, on behalf of the people of the state? And if we had that then, I really believe we wouldn't have gotten as bad as we did during this pandemic. We didn't have that then. And I'll just be honest with you, the governor is just a nice person, a much nicer person than we had before. But I keep telling folks that's the floor. That's not the ceiling. And I would tell folks, if we're not careful, we're going to get what we had before or worse. And I think people are finally beginning to see over these past few weeks the type of administration that we're going to have, and it's not much better than where we were. And we outperform polls in every race I've done. In that race, a month before election time, they had us down again, and we overperformed by over 25%. In my public advocates race, believe it or not, they told me I wouldn't be able to win that because this time I'm not running against somebody I don't know, that people don't know. This is 60 people in a race. A lot of them are named that people know their names and have been in the game before. They had us about fourth or fifth, and obviously we came in first. And so we know that we always outperform polls. We know our message works better than expressing the polls, and we also know we peak late. And the people who normally come out and vote for us don't show up in those polls as well.
Now I did for the first time. I actually did phone banking for the Working Family Party for you and for I think they were pushing
Anna Maria Archila? For Anna Maria?
No. And when you were running for lieutenant governor, they were pushing.
Oh, Cynthia Nixon, yeah, Cynthia.
They were pushing you, but they were also pushing. Forgot her name. Teach Out for.
Zephyr Teach Out, yes.
Right. So I was phone banking, and they gave me numbers that weren't in my area. They were all like upstate, all Albany, Buffalo, like almost near Niagara Falls areas. And what surprised me is many of them knew who you were. Mm. Some of them who didn't know were willing to listen to me about who you were. And you had a lot of support up that way, which I didn't expect because, she's from up there. You actually had more support. And I know that from phone banking and actually calling people for like 3 days or people up in that. And that my list was only up there. So I was I was really shocked. Yeah, you had a lot. And someone was like, oh, I've already voted. And I even did the election day. And they said, I already voted. And they voted for you. So I was like, oh, okay. So, I know.
I appreciate that. Definitely, man. I'm excited because it looks like we have even more support in Buffalo and Rochester and up in those areas than we did in 2018. We try to learn the lessons that we learned from 2018 and apply them here. And it looks like it's working. So we're excited. Another thing is we're going to have debates. It's one thing that she wouldn't do before. And I understand because her policies and decisions they sound good if there's no one else there to challenge them. And so these debates are going to further show the differences in a campaign like ours, who's really running to lift up working and struggling New Yorkers, and a campaign that's actually trying to make sure that the policy they put in place benefit the people who donated millions of dollars to them.
Now, a lot of people feel that because you would be considered a progressive, and that the progressive message works well downstate, but doesn't work well upstate. Have you found that to be the case or not?
I found it to be when people weaponize words, they're able to use those weapons effectively. So we have to really deconstruct what it is they mean, because what I found that everybody from Cuomo to Hochul to all the folks that normally aren't associated with that will say, I'm also progressive, and here are the progressive things I've done, which means the message that people are trying to say, which is everybody should have a home, everybody should be able to try to get to school and not be inundated with debt, everybody should have access to healthcare and mental health services. Those things are the right message. Where the dividing line has occurred is that there are some people who are willing to push through when they get a call from the governor, the mayor, or their leader saying, you can't do this, you have to support this person, you have to support that. And people are willing to say, no, we're going to support the policy that best represents the people, even if that goes against your establishment. That's where the dividing line is. And then what the establishment and the established folks like the governor, like Jay Jacobs, they try to discourage that. And so they try to make these demarcations that don't really explain what's happening. And those of us who are saying, no, we're going to keep pushing through, even if it risks, some risk to title you have, or has some political risk to it. We just have to get it done. And if the party would do that, I think we'd just be in a much better position than we are in right now. What I do know is from Brooklyn to Buffalo, Westchester, everywhere in the state, there's differences in how people are living and the culture and the local governments, but the buckets have been the same that I found. People are all worried about public safety. People are worried about either being evicted or foreclosed on. People want to have good schools for their children to go to, and they want their kids to do a little better than they did. Those are universal. Even transportation is very similar, depending if you have a system that's not working properly, you don't have a system at all, or you just need your roads fixed. And so we see the buckets similar. The people who push this upstate, downstate divide, this weaponizing of what progressive means, they just benefit. And what we find is that people who winning at all costs is what's most important. But the cost is so steep, and we're feeling the cost of that philosophy right now.
Now you've been out there standing with some of protesters and activists, and people say Black Lives Matter, and they look at that as they try to say that you're anti-police. The whole defund the police thing, you want to get rid of the police. So for those who say that, what is your message as far as that's concerned?
Well, it's interesting. I hope everybody believes Black Lives Matter. I have no problem saying it. It's awful interesting. I always tell folks, if you can find one video of me saying defund the police, not two, just one, you won't be able to say it. You won't be able to find it because I didn't, and that was because I thought even back then that phrasing probably wasn't the best expression of what I think people were trying to say. But here's the difference. I was in the streets and I was making sure that protesters' voice was being heard, and I was lifting up their issues. And what I told all the Democratic leaders was really important. What I said is our job is not to tell people who are in pain and who are in trauma and in the streets how to express that pain and trauma. Our job is to take that pain and trauma and turn it into workable policy and solutions. So why are you spending so much time trying to force people to say a certain string of words the way you want them to say it, who are in the streets protesting, when you're in the room in the halls of power? Why don't we put forth a platform that addresses it? And so I feel like we wasted a whole lot of energy and time focused on the wording as opposed to actually having a real conversation about what public safety is, what public safety isn't. That public safety includes lifting up law enforcement partners, many of whom come in to do a good job, who risk their lives to get things like guns off the street, and we have to respect and honor that. But we also know that we ask them to do everything where everybody else has failed. You try to send in law enforcement to fill the gap, and that's not going to work. They don't have the tools to do it, so it's unfair to them, and of course, it's unfair to the community that has been starved of resources for such a long time. And that's not something we should be backing down from. That's something that everybody should be discussing. What is public safety in Westchester? What is public safety in Brooklyn and Buffalo? What does it look like? What does it actually look like? And when I ask a community, and ask anybody actually, even people who think they disagree with me, I say, think of a community that you deem as safe. No one has ever mentioned yet a community that has a police officer on every corner or sirens riding around. As a matter of fact, the communities that have the most police and have the most incarcerated, we also deem as the least safe. And that's not because they don't have a job to do, they do. But the question is, what makes the communities that we deem safe? They have access to safe and affordable housing. They have access to quality schools. They have access to more than potato chips to feed their children. They have access to mental health and health and physical health services. They have access to jobs to help pay for those things. And many of the communities that haven't had that for a long time, we send police on. They send police in to fix on the back end. But we should have been doing so much more on the front end. And then lastly, with that, none of this gives you an excuse to shoot up a block. Just does not. And there has to be accountability and consequences for actions like that. What I keep saying is, well, how much longer are we going to spend more on the consequences and accountability than actually preventing it from happening in the first place?
I always say that. I mean, and it's funny because we say that out here, Damon and I. He couldn't make it tonight, but he said, "What's up?" We talk about like a city like Mount Vernon, like just where I am right now. They strip us of the resources, and that's exactly what you said. And then the only 24-hour agency to answer the calls is the police. Yeah. And then we get mad, when some of those calls didn't require a badge and a gun, but our elected officials who make the legislation and who find the funding for anything they want to find the funding for can't find the funding for the programs that we need. You know what I'm saying? So the police don't have to answer some of those calls. And I think that's what we need to be dealing with. So how would you handle that?
I mean, that's a fact. And what you said is really important. We don't have the only 24-hour service that you said is 911, which usually will lead you to a criminal response. Hopefully, if you're physically sick, you get an ambulance. But if you're mentally sick, you're going to get a criminal response as well. Like in most places I've been to, the police departments have access to unlimited overtime. And it's an agency. And so if they're asking for resources, you get the resources that you think you need. My question has always been, why doesn't any other agency have access to the same overtime? Departments of health, departments of mental hygiene. Why don't they have access to overtime? In New York City, it's called ACS, folks who deal with our children's services. Why, as a matter of fact, it was officer telling me if they call children's services after hours and they're not there, they're stuck with that child. They got to figure out what to do. And so the question is, why don't these agencies have access to the same resources so that 24 hours a day, people can actually get the service that they need? And that's a question that nobody can truly answer. I've also said, when we're looking at things like crime data, why is it only that the police department look at that data? There's so many other agencies that should be involved in figuring out, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to send my resource to this community. We know what those communities are. Those are the communities that we send additional officers to. Well, what else are we sending that's in addition to what's already there? We have community groups that do amazing jobs when it comes to violence and violence interruption and preventing violence from happening. They're begging and pleading just to get 8-hour shifts when we know this stuff is happening 24 hours a day. So, the former governor almost got this right. I remember he withheld funding to municipalities and he said, I'm not going to release this money until I get a policing plan. This was in the height of the protest. By the way, Democrats do a terrible job when it comes to talking about public safety. Just terrible. And we have to do much better at it. And so when they don't know what to do, they go to Republican like talking points, which I think are even worse at public safety. But when he did that, I thought the concept made sense. But we said very loudly, like, this is not the way to do it. You should ask for a public safety plan. And of that public safety plan, you obviously want to have policing that's transparent, accountable, and doing the job that we asked them to do. But without the rest of it, you're not going to really be able to fix this problem because you're still equating public safety with policing as a part of, instead of policing be a part of public safety.
And when he asked for that criminal justice reform or whatever their plan was, and he said that everybody had to hand that in, I know personally everyone didn't hand it in, and there wasn't no withhold of money to those municipalities that did not hand them in. But nothing came of that, though. And I know he had the whole thing and it caused him to step down was part of that. But, we put things in place, but we don't follow through on them.
We have a lot of folks who have not been involved in this space. I don't know if you can still see me. I'm frozen on this end. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the current governor is unfortunately a part of that. She's never been part of this public safety discussion. And so when that happens, it's very dangerous because people are trying to learn lessons on the spot that we've already learned and we've already figured out. And we understand simply over policing and over incarcerating doesn't get you what you want. And you end up apologizing for it a few years later, even while people are still being harmed. And the governor just never understood what to do. He was trying to just respond to what was happening in the street. I remember very clearly the governor saying, okay, you can go home now, you've won. And it was a complete abdication of the leadership that was needed at that moment. And we just had an amazing opportunity to have a real conversation on public safety that could have helped lead this nation.
Now, one of our listeners, Alex Harrison, says public safety was politicized by both parties during the election cycle. So what to you is public safety?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you. What to you? It's been a term that's been thrown around so much. I don't know if people understand what we mean when we say public safety. What do you mean when you say?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, you ask a person what community they.
Oh, we lost you for a minute. He is driving. We will wait for him to reconnect. I think his signal was low. He did say he was frozen for a few. This is Black Westchester Super Tuesdays. We're interviewing New York City governor candidate Jumaane Williams. He's driving. We're waiting for him to sign back on. Some of the comments that were made. Here he goes. We got him back right now. There we go. There you go. Welcome back. There you go.
Trying to make stuff work.
No, I was just telling everybody, I know you had a weak signal and you're doing this on, you're doing this out in the car. So,
So yeah, what is public safety? And as I was talking about before, when you think of communities that we deem as safe and communities that we don't deem as safe, we see a lot of differences. We do see school systems that are either very well funded or they have PTAs that can fill in the gaps. We do see places that have more than just junk food to feed children. We do see people that have access to health care and mental health services when they need it. We do see people who have housing that's not full of mold and rats and actually housing that people can afford. We see these type of things. And very often, people will point to communities and say, these communities, they're asking for additional officers. They want to be safe. And I would say, yes, that is true. They have also asked for quality housing that they can afford. They've also asked for school systems that have sports programs and maybe more than one guidance counselor per 5,000 kids. They've also asked for access to health care. They've also asked not to have to be able to choose between paying the rent and paying for prescription medication. Nobody seems to hear those asks. I mean, we don't hear this. We don't have the same urgency to provide those services for those same communities. And so we know what makes a community safe. We just don't have the wherewithal to push to get the resources that are needed and have been starved for a very long time. And I heard something pretty powerful the other day when someone said our response now is to arrest the children we arrested in the 90s, the children of the people we arrested in the 90s, which means we have been failing generationally at this. and we know what works and doesn't work. We have an opportunity to get it right while not ignoring accountability and consequences. It's important, but we also know what actually provides true safety. And when we do that, it's actually helpful to the officer that is not going to be asked to solve the homelessness crisis. It is not going to be asked to solve the mental health crisis. It's going to be called when needed, particularly when there's acute situations going on. But I always say, I always liken it to a hospital. If you are immediately hurting and you need to go to triage in the hospital, it's good. But in the back of the hospital, there's so many people, interdisciplinary doctors who are brilliant, working together to save lives. But it's like our community stuck in triage. Nobody will take us in that back room with all those other good stuff going on. We have the ability to do that. And when people can't have this conversation, they can't talk about it, they don't understand, then they resort to your anti-this or focus on things that we just don't need to be focused on. People, by the way, have a need to be safe and to feel safe. And we have to deliver that for them. By the way, if you're actually safe and don't feel safe, that's still problematic. So we have to be able to do both of those things.
So what would you say that the former governor and the current governor are not doing that you would do if elected?
Well, I've been working on issues of the pillars of our campaign: public safety, housing, and a transformative economy. I've been working on those issues for years. I've been a leading voice on public safety for years. One of the few Democrats and quote unquote progressive Democrats who have been working on this issue. God bless you, for many years. As a matter of fact, I have helped. It's funny to me that people look at 2018 and 2019 as the numbers, because many of the policies that we pushed and fought against, many people we got funded when people said it wasn't going to work, helped New York City get to 2018 and 2019. And we were saying then, look, this is working. Look, we are actually safe. But people were saying the same thing they're saying now. You're anti-this, you love criminals, this and that. And I'm like, we're actually the safest we've ever been. And I'm proud to have helped the conversation being shaped as that was happening. But again, you have to actually be safe and feel safe. But it's ironic now that those are the years that people are looking at, because when we were saying, look at where we are, people were ignoring it. We asked for $1 billion to be put into the budget for gun violence in particular and victim services. We know that leaders love to lift up victims' trauma and stories to push bad policy, but they don't give the support that's needed when they actually need it. So we asked for $1 billion to be put in the budget. The governor didn't do it. She did put in $1 billion to give to a billionaire in Buffalo for a stadium that's not going to be even built in Buffalo, and for an organization that hired her husband, even though he's never worked on these issues. So there's a very clear comparison that needs to be done about what we're fighting for, who we're fighting for, and what the people we're running against is fighting for. Myself and Ana Maria Archilla, who's my running mate, we have a history of working on the ground for working and struggling New Yorkers. And the governor does not. She comes from the Albany of old, and I want to really rearrange the Albany of old to work for us. Another place is housing. We knew the eviction moratorium had to end, but to see it end in the middle of winter, in the middle of Omicron surge, made no sense. We've seen people demonize what good cause eviction actually is versus what it is versus what they're saying it is. Making sure people, as we're faced with 220,000 evictions right now, we try to make sure folks aren't frivolously evicted. We ask for funding to be put in place so we can stop particularly our small homeowners from being foreclosed on. We did not get it. A great comparison is something the governor is proud of: 100,000 units to be built and preserved for the housing, the housing that we need. I got to tell you, that's not enough, probably for just Westchester or Mount Vernon, much less the entirety of the state. We have a plan for 1 million units to be built and preserved at no more than 30% of someone's income. That's a big difference. We have plans that match the moment that we're in, the crisis we're in. The governor's not. They do things that are based on how do I win this next election, and we're paying a cost for that. We need to elect folks that of figuring out how can I help New Yorkers, and hopefully that will get me elected. But the number one thing has to be, how do I help most New Yorkers who are suffering right now?
What are your thoughts on bail reform? So we started out, there was a need for some sort of no cash bail reform, because there were people who were arrested for misdemeanor crimes who couldn't afford bail, who were just sitting in jail. And the no cash bail, that part was good. It seemed that maybe it went a little too far, and the bail reform needs to be reformed. And I know law enforcement is saying that's the reason for the spike in crime now, is because of bail reform. What are your thoughts on bail reform?
I'm always willing to listen to what people have to say if they can show me something different. I have to say I haven't seen yet the data and information that would say that the reforms are needed. And I will tell folks, don't listen to me. You should listen to the governor. And I would point people to look up the New York Daily News and the governor's own op-ed. And when you read that op-ed, she spends the first few paragraphs saying that bail reform is working. We can't say it is the reason for the increase in crime. And if we change it, we're going to lower. If we change it, we're not going to see a significant drop in crime. This is the governor speaking. She then goes on to say, but we're going to change it anyway. How destructive is that? And that's what I say when people are doing things just for an election as opposed to what's best for people. And I say that because there are cities across this country. This country is seeing a spike in violence, violent crimes, also a spike in suicide. We're seeing transit hubs across the country also see increase in crime in those spaces. And they're happening in places that never change their bail. And so when we talk about bail, when we talk about dangerousness, people say, we're the only state that doesn't use dangerousness. And I say, yes, but those states have cities that have violence that's worse than ours. So why are we trying to mimic what other people are doing when they're doing a worse job than us? Now, if you're a victim of crime, data means absolutely nothing to you. Those 10 people who were shot in the train, in the MTA, in the train station, data, who cares about data, right? I'm shot, God forbid, my family lost a loved one. But what leaders have to do is be able to put things in perspective so people can see. New York is actually doing better than some spaces across this country. We got to figure out why. What are we doing that's working, and what are we not doing that's not working? And we also don't want to have the knee-jerk reactions that have us apologize 30 or 40 years from now. In 94, we did the 94 crime bill. Right. People apologize for it a few decades later. I have a baby girl now. Thank you for, asking about her. But I don't want us apologizing to her 30 years from now. We have the opportunity to get it right at this moment in time. Somebody's agreeing with me, sound like. But we have the ability to do it right at this moment in time. So why not do that? A bullet went through my mother's car window as it was parked in front of her home. This is not something that's new to me. I can name the people, sadly, I went to high school with that are no longer here, and I was told certain things were going to solve it, and it didn't. My sister called me. She was going to work, and she had interaction with a homeless person who was clearly mentally unstable. And I remember saying, look, I want to get some help for the person. I'm worried if I call the police, they're just going to take him to jail. Who else can I call? And I remember saying that's the problem we're trying to fix. There's no one else to call. We have to have a place that we can call that gets continuum of care for people who need it. And so what we want to do is look at what's actually, and by the way, even down in New York City, and it's probably similar across the state, the cops are actually doing what we asked them to do. They're getting a record number of guns off the street. They're risking their lives and getting these guns off the street. I don't even think people know that. The question I have is why are these cases not making it through the court system? That's something we have to look at. But if we're focused on bail and dangerousness where other states haven't changed and they're still dealing with issues, then we're not focused on, okay, why are these cases not going to the courts? They should go to the courts. If someone's guilty, they got to go do what they got to do. And if they're not, they need to go home. But they can't be languishing sitting around. You got cops making these arrests. How would you feel? You're making these arrests last year and this person still hasn't been adjudicated. That doesn't make any sense. So I want to make sure that we're focusing our energy, our resources, and time on the places that are actually going to deliver the safety that New Yorkers deserve and need.
CUNY, I did a few interviews a while back with a group of people that are fighting for a new deal for CUNY. I think where CUNY is free to residents of New York if they want to go to a CUNY school. And someone asks, what funding is going to be put in place for CUNY?
I'm a public school baby from preschool and masters. That includes City University of New York at Brooklyn College. One of the first reports we did as public advocate was on CUNY and how it is an economic engine to get folks from working, struggling class to the middle class. It's clear as day how that's an economic engine to get folks into a higher income class and brackets. CUNY should be free. I support a new deal for CUNY. And I always interested in when people don't know the history of CUNY. The biggest expansion of CUNY happened during the Great Depression. And we expanded CUNY, the largest it's ever been, because folks then believed that in order to get out of the situation, we got to make sure that we educate our population. And CUNY was free fully until the 1970s. The only change that happened then was the complexion of the people who were going to CUNY. And so we do have a history of getting free education to people who are in New York, and we have to continue that. So I'm a big proponent of CUNY and SUNY, for that matter, to make sure that people have access to the education without coming out with an arm full of debt that they may not be able to repay.
See, and that's what we talked about. Like, we've had some recent violence in Mount Vernon, and we were talking about the violence aspect, but we don't talk about everything else. Some of our schools are graduating our kids just to graduate them, but are not preparing them for anything. And all kids are not college bound. So, like in Mount Vernon, we have a lack of trade schools, like, things for them to learn a trade. You can learn a trade as a mechanic and have a career and support your family and so many other things. But these kids are coming out of school without the necessary tools to succeed.
I'm 100% in support of vocational schools and trade schools, 1,000%. We want to make sure that young people are on track in certain ways. But as you mentioned, everybody's not going to go to a four-year college. You're just not going to do it. You can get a very well-paying skill in those vocational schools. And we just have to make sure that we're funding these places and providing access to these young people. But we have to have a leader and a governor that understands these things. And if we don't, we get what we've already gotten.
Right. And see, when we talk about these communities and we talk about the crime, we don't talk about the cause, the root cause. We deal with all of that, and everything deals with the end. You know what I'm saying? We're not dealing with the root cause on how can we prevent this so more people can succeed and we have less crime, we have less need to do crime. And education is definitely one of those tools that we need to be. We need to invest in our schools, and we need to prepare our youth to be for the future.
That's 100% correct. We have data that shows the number one way to cut violent crime arrests in young people is actually a job. An 8-week job can cut arrests up to 6 months after that. So we understand the importance of jobs in our young people's lives in general. We have put out a report on healing-centered schools to make sure that schools are educating our young people in a healing-centered approach, and the productivity that causes, the safety that causes, makes their families be able to have access to things that they need. There are ways that we can do this. Again, it's harder because people understand. I got to call 911. People understand the system of law enforcement. That's where I call right away to get everything. In New York City, we said after the first surge in the subways, this alone, we have to do more than this alone. We said that after the second surge, after the third surge, we're going on the fourth surge. And so we've been pushing this mantra, and sometimes people are hearing, you don't want any police at all. And I always said, of course, I understand the need. People's taxpayers should get that service. It's a service that people are paying for. They're just not getting all the other services. As a matter of fact, many of the other services were the only things that were defunded in the past few years. And so this is a conversation that we can have, and we just have to have someone that understands how to have it and the courage to push back when it's needed. Because this is a conversation that's hard to have when violence is down. It's even harder to have when violence is going up. And you either have people who aren't sufficiently honoring the fact that violence is going up. We have to be honest about that, no matter where you're on the spectrum. And people are dying, and they deserve real answer to that. And you have to be able to do that in a way that actually puts in context where we were in the 90s, where we were, and where we are now. That's difficult to do, and unfortunately, people sometimes just start to cater to whatever they think is going to help get some additional votes. But that harms very often the same communities that they're purporting to protect.
So to the people in Westchester and the surrounding area, that is our core audience. I mean, we go further than that, but for our core audience, I asked why should they vote for you? What is your platform? What are you running on, so people get to know a little bit more about you? Who, they've only seen the little clips on the TV and what other people say about you. I want to give you a chance to speak.
I appreciate that. Folks can go to JumaneWilliams.com, JUMAANE Williams.com. We're probably the only campaign right now that's put on very detailed platforms about what we want to do and how we're going to do it. Our three primary pillars is public safety, housing, and a transformative economy. As I mentioned, Democrats are terrible when it comes to talking about public safety. They're also pretty bad when it comes to talk about taxing. One of the things that we know needs to happen is we have to raise revenue. We want to lower taxes on middle class, working class New Yorkers, but we have to get that revenue. And one thing the governor has said is that she will not raise taxes. And whenever you hear that, it's usually being said, it's a Republican line that's used to scare people who will never be affected by the revenue raising we're trying to do. And so there were 125 billionaires who got $220 billion more during this pandemic. That is more than the size of this budget, of the state budget. And what we're saying is we have to raise revenue from everybody, not as a punishment, but we have to have civic responsible conversations. Everybody has to do what they can with what they have where they are. And if we want to get the housing that's needed, if we want to get the health care that's needed, then we have to adjust the taxes. Some people are paying more than they should, and some people aren't paying nearly as much as they should, to make sure that the people who benefited from this pandemic are not taking away the health care and housing from the people who helped us get through this pandemic. And that's a very big difference between myself and this governor, who told folks, "Well, I want you to come back. I'm not going to raise your taxes," when her own budget director has made clear that we haven't lost any millionaires and billionaires because of our taxes. We lost maybe one to Mar-a-Lago. I'm very happy he's there. I hope he stays there. But the people who are leaving New York are the people who can't afford to stay here anymore. And we have to have somebody who's lifting up and looking out for them. And that's what our campaign is about.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for your time. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want people to know about you?
Please come back out on June 28th and vote Jumaane Williams for governor. And we have a great running mate named Anna Maria Chilla, running for lieutenant governor. And we have a history of speaking up and standing up for the people who are hurting the most in our state. And that's what we need.
Let me ask you one more question before you mentioned that your primary is in June. Redistricting has pushed back some of the other races. What are your thoughts on this whole redistricting thing? Because
I'm trying. If you look up the defendant on those maps, the primary defendant is Governor Kathy Hochul. The maps that were put forth were terrible. Anybody could have seen that, and it was the type of thing that this party has done, unfortunately, and it may cost us. We may actually have more Republican seats now when they're finished than we would have had if they had only tried to be a little cute, not too cute. And so we see some, all of it might be pushed to August, in August, who knows, which is the worst time. Nobody has ever voted in August. So we're going to have such a suppressed voter turnout. It's horrific. But also, I'm going to leave with this, the governor just replaced the lieutenant governor. Yes. And this is another example of win at all costs. We're seeing the fights with Roe v. Wade. We're seeing the fights of so many things across this country. And everybody knows, I have some issues with the Democratic Party. I'm clear about that. But I'm also clear what happens and what is happening to this Republican Party is just, it's a travesty. You can't even explain the cult of personality that is what's driving this party right now. And so we need every Democrat in the House that we can get. This governor has decided to take a swing district Democrat in a purple district in this state that was an Obama-Trump flip to run for lieutenant governor at a time that we need every single Democrat. It's this win at all costs status quo that has harmed us for so long. And it's that kind of move that's going to have national implications. And it's just hard to watch happen in real time.
Last to social media, how do people get in touch with you? You said your website, say it again, and how can people follow you?
Most of it is Jumaane Williams. So the website, JumaaneWilliams.com. Twitter is at Jumaane Williams. Instagram at Jumaane.Williams, and the same on Facebook.
Thank you for your time. Would love
Appreciate
to talk
you,
to you after you win the primary, if you win, and come back and talk to us again. And I wish you the best, my brother.
Yes, sir. Peace and blessing. Love and light to you.
All right, peace. That was our Super Tuesday interview with New York City governor candidate Jumaane Williams. I saw some of your questions. I tried to get to most of them. I didn't get the chance to get to all of them. I was dealing with a certain time frame. We had to push the interview back, and as you see, he was traveling. So, hopefully, people who didn't know much about him, especially here in Westchester and the surrounding areas, know a little bit more about him. But definitely, if he's intrigued you at all, follow him on social media. Go to his website, see what he's about. The most important thing is that you go to the ballot box more informed, and we don't vote for personalities. We don't vote for someone because they're a woman or because they're black, but we pick the best candidates and we make informed decisions at the ballot box. This is a crucial time right now. We need to get it right with the people that we put in office. And for all of y'all complaining about what's going on right now, there's a saying that's been accredited to many people, so I don't know who originally said it. You get the government you deserve because you get the government you vote for. With that in mind, it's time to make more informed decisions at the ballot box. If you don't like the way things are going, look into all the candidates and see who is the best candidate that speaks to your needs. With that, we're out. We'll be doing these Super Tuesday interviews with candidates so that the Sunday show from now to the primary is not full of nothing but candidates. So I wanted to separate that so we can continue to give you the people before the politics, cover the people before the politics on Sunday. Until next time,